anybody recognise this young man? How do you recognise?
Twitter.
Twitter. do you know who this is?
Max Green.
Max Green. So Max has just arrived from his house. He's very kindly come agreed to just pop in today. But we were just chatting about a video we watched a couple of years ago of a young man at the age of 15.
No way.
This is Max.
Oh my goodness.
So this is my ex-student Max Green, and some of you in our module last year watched a video and I did an interview with a pupil.
Yeah.
Yeah? It's hard to recognise now, but Max was 15 at the time and is now grown up.
You've got my age, yeah.
You're 15 now, you're 22, I think.
Yeah. Just checking.
He's now 22. So if you carry on talking for a minute, Max and I will just catch up for a minute, and then we can have a chat to Max about his experiences of school and life and good stuff like that. So yeah, I was Max's deputy head teacher when Max was probably 15, I think. There he is, and this is me, a few years ago now. And that's the interview I showed you, didn't I?
Yeah.
So you remember thinking about...
I hate my voice.
Yeah, we won't play it again, don't we? But yeah, there's cheeky Max there. So, I mean, Max did attend a special school and came to my special school, which was an independent day school for young people, and this was the definition of the young people, with complex learning needs, communication difficulties and challenging behaviours. So that was the sort of banding for the children that came there. I interviewed Max on day one before he started the school, and he was incredibly articulate. He was very keen to engage in learning. Had a very positive start. And Max went on to become our chairman of the school council for 3 years running. Couldn't get him on. Okay.
Once I was in.
Once he was in, made some significant changes to the school. What was the first thing you asked for?
Mirrors.
Mirrors.
So it's quite funny actually because I visited this school and I said, right, I've got to go to the toilet because I want to check if this mirror is still there.
Yeah.
And anyway, it wasn't. So the head teacher just went, oh, I'm so sorry about that. So anyway, next time I went, I forgot to tell you, next time I went, she goes, and you'll be very pleased to know that the mirror is back.
The mirror is back.
Yeah.
This was a school for mostly boys at the beginning, wasn't it? Started off with about 30 young people, probably.
Yeah.
And yeah, Max was really keen to spend some of his budget on mirrors.
Well, I thought as like a young, growing, teenager, I walked in the bathroom one day, just had PE, and I thought, I've got to make my hair look nice and that. I always try to. You don't look it there. I always try to make sure I looked half decent, and I couldn't do my hair because there was no mirror, and it just really bothered me.
Yeah.
So from that point, I was like, right, forget your budget crisis, forget ponds, forget all this, mirrors.
Spend some money. But Max and I'm quite happy for you to ask any questions, and I'm sure Max is too.
Yeah.
Do you want to sit down, or do you want to stand up, or what do you want to do?
I've got to stand or sit, or what do you want?
I'll stand. That's easy. I'll lean.
I'll leave, yeah.
I'll lean. So Max comes every year to give a talk in January to about 150 odd people.
Yeah, yeah.
So all the beginning teachers, so the PGCE students, all that kind of stuff, he's coming back in January. But let's not tell them too much about what you've been up to since school. But do you want to tell us a bit about your primary school experiences? What was that like?
So primary, I think, because of obviously the year it was, very lack of understanding for autism. I think teachers were still trying to kind of get round, in their heads about what it was.
Yeah.
Because the Autism Act wasn't even in at that point, and my mum used to go to the schools and go, I think he's got this, I think he's got that, and a lot of the teachers used to go, no, he's just naughty. And that was the kind of understanding of autism. And things, like my mum looks back on, bless her, like going to the shop and me having to be dragged out of the shop screaming and crying. But in reality, that was just me having sensory overload, and I couldn't communicate. I couldn't talk till I was 6. So the only way I could really communicate to my mum and dad was to scream and shout or cry, and because I couldn't articulate what I needed to say.
Yeah.
And it was the same for school. I remember having a TA, and for my first few years of primary, I couldn't speak. that obviously slowed up my learning even more.
Did they have any other forms of communication with you?
Yeah, so they taught me Macintosh.
Macintosh, yeah.
And it's funny actually, because I go to the gym up the road and there was this woman and she goes, "Where do I recognise you from?" I forgot to say it.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I lived in Compton all my life. She went, "Oh, what's your name?" And I went, "Max." She went, "Not Max Free." And I went, "Yeah." And she went, "You little shit." So she did say, "I taught you Macintosh."
Oh, did she?
So she was the woman that taught me Macintosh.
Well, if you can't communicate, we talk about this quite a lot, if you can't communicate verbally, it's a very frustrating world to be in.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stereotypes you're looking at, you know, like the brat or whatever, because people just didn't understand, and a lot of parents, I feel, need to be educated as well, especially when there are children in a classroom with autism or ADHD, because I used to get judged really badly by parents, you know, because parents just didn't understand.
What labels have you got?
ADHD, autism, OCD, epilepsy, and then at school as well I started to develop tics because of the side effects from my medicine. So there was a lot of stuff. Not only I was the kid who had a condition as long as his arm, but making friends was incredibly hard anyway. But to the point in year 4 I started having these symptoms of tics. You know, people didn't want to sit next to me because if anyone's watched wrestling, you know, some of you might have, but there's a wrestler called The Undertaker and he rolls his eyes in the back of his head. And I used to have to do that literally every 2 seconds. And if I was talking to you, well, it was just a tick, you know, it was just, you know, like someone swearing has to do. I had to keep going like that, and if I was talking to somebody, I'd have to look down every 2 seconds. I'd be like, yeah. So, and people just thought, oh, you know, that's weird, didn't want to be sat next to, because, you know, who wants to sit next to the kid that's, you know, kind of twitching away and, you know,
distracting them.
Yeah, and even my mum first realised, because I was eating dinner one night and she just saw me eat, and every 2 seconds it was, you know, my mum went.
Was that the epilepsy or just the medication?
That was just a side effect of the ADHD medicine.
So what age were you put on your medicine?
Quite young, I can't remember the exact age, but I think as soon as I was diagnosed, really, doctor's answer was medicine, which looking back, I mean, don't get me wrong, medicine is a very good thing, but it needs to be used a bit more carefully, because there's a lot of side effects that come to it, and at the same time, I don't really agree with any medicine that really stimulates the brain.
Let's just remember, Ritalin or Concerta is a Class A psychostimulant in the same category as heroin and cocaine. So you're giving 5-6-year-old children Class A drugs.
I used to take 4 tablets a day at one point, and I remember being in the classroom and I was so out of it. You know, they give you this medication to concentrate, but actually, to me, at that time, looking back, actually they probably just gave it to me to keep me quiet, you know, keep me subdued.
If you've got all that stuff going on, you're already overstimulated and getting like major sensory overload, as you said before.
Yeah.
And then they give you a stimulant. Surely that's like just sensory even more overload.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And to the point where, you know, a lot of the years at school in primary, particularly because I have good memories. Don't get me wrong, but there was during that time I can't really remember a lot, you know, because. And I think, you know, my mum's quite, you know, she's quite active, and she knew that actually, no, this is not good. And, you know, she took me off that, and then the tics happened on another one, so now it's take me off that one.
Yeah, the thing about ADHD as well, it's not that young people can't, or adults can't concentrate or can't focus, they focus on too much.
Yeah.
So actually the world is so overly stimulating, it's very hard to maintain that intention, and particularly in busy classroom contexts where you've got 30 other kids.
Yeah. The thing is though as well, is 90% of cases with epilepsy, they don't actually know what causes epilepsy, a big 90%. And they still don't know what causes mine. All we know is it's not caused by lights, which is the 10% of people that know.
Yeah.
But one of the side effects to ADHD medicine that they said to me when they diagnosed me with epilepsy is taking ADHD medicine. Because it lowers your seizure threshold.
Okay.
Because everyone can have one fit, that could be it. But if you're taking tablets,
when did you have seizure?
4 years ago. But you know, the equivalent, they say as well, a fit is the equivalent of running a marathon. Because all your muscles are going at full flow, but you're never as strong, they say, when you're in fit, because there's no limit to what your body is doing. And you know, when I had one at work, naively they tried to hold me down, which is the worst thing you can do. If anyone ever has a fit, you just have to let them have it, and then put them in recovery, and then make sure you bring relevant people. But it's getting that awareness, people didn't know how to get with it.
Can I ask the audience if you've got any questions about primary school? Any questions you might like to ask Max about primary school? And then we'll think about secondary school, and then we'll think about moving through. Anything you might like to know?
Did you ever have suspensions and things from primary?
Yeah, I mean primary I did, because I remember one day a friend goaded me, kicked me down the toilet door, and I did it stupidly, naively, wanted to be cool, wanted to make mates. I'd done it, didn't really think about it. Stole a bike, ran outside school, was trying to get away from the teachers, grabbed on a bike, rode it down the road, went outside the school. They chased me after, following me, and then I locked them out of the school with the gate with a padlock.
But context dependent, you know, why would anybody want to run away from their teachers? You know, I mean, it's the environment. Did you hide from teachers one day?
I hid from teachers. I hid in plain sight one day.
What kind of people?
I hid in plain sight, so you guys listen to this one. At secondary school, I got sick. Because, you know, don't get me wrong, teaching assistants are lovely, but I think if they don't listen or understand you, they can, you know, because you say about the fabric, you know, Velcro, you know, and I wanted just to be independent, you know, because when I joined secondary school, I didn't want people to know that I was different. One thing I said to a TA was, if you're in the class, because I'm going to need help, because I'm not, you know, great with all of that education and everything else. But I don't want it to be obvious that you're in there for me, because that automatically puts a target on my back. You know, if someone's going to see me sat with someone, they're going to go, oh, he's weird, he's different, he's retarded, or whatever. And even though that's not the case, unfortunately kids look at it like that. And so anyway, I asked that, they didn't do it, they sat someone next to me, I was targeted from that point forward. But one day, I literally hid in plain sight, and the teachers were looking for me, because I made it so I was about 10 minutes late for my lesson. So I figured the teachers are going to check the lesson first, I'm not in there. So they think, where the hell is he? So 10 minutes later, I go back into the lesson, and my mate is texting me going, all the teachers are looking for you. I'm like, good. And I put my phone away. Anyway, next thing I know, teachers...
A helicopter.
no word of a lie. They literally rang my dad and said, we can't find him. He's missing. So my dad's left work, and he's driving down the road in field trying to find me. And anyway, the next call my dad got was the most funniest call he ever got. We found your son. Where was he? In class. You idiots. So yeah, I could and I thought, where's the one place they wouldn't look?
Well, it should be. Very clever. So yeah, interesting. Yeah. So what was good at primary school?
I had a really good year 5 teacher. She was really good. She realised that I struggled making friends. She realised I struggled with anxiety. And what she done was she created me this box, this green box. She said, bring in photos that make you happy, that make you, remember home. And she even, I forgot to say this as well, but I think it was her suggested maybe having a friend there every to my mum and dad, because I was always my friends outside. But anyway, any time I got a bad thought or worry, I used to write it down. She said, now I want you to put it in the box, and I want you to forget about it. Once it's in the box, it's gone. We'll talk about it at the end of the day if you want to, or we'll throw it away. And what that helped me with is actually prioritise what was important and what wasn't. Because a lot of the thoughts that kids have, are silly at the time. Is David going to like me? Is David going to want to play football? And the thing is, with someone with autism, that will keep going around in their head to the point where they just can't focus on anything else, because that to them is the thing that's in their head. For someone else, I'd say, without a condition, they might think about it for a minute, and before long, they go, well, whatever, and they move on to something else. And what it taught me was, by the end of the day, I used to go all through these thoughts, and I used to think, why was I worried about that? Really? You know, and just
that was one you'd already put in the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get rid, to get out your system.
And not only it stopped me from worrying at the time, but also at the end of the day, when I went through it, it made me realise, God, you know, I'm worrying about silly things that really I shouldn't be. You know, at the point it was serious, but actually, in hindsight, it wasn't really that big as what I made it out to be. I still do that today, you know, especially this year, you know, I've not had the best year. It's not been a terrible year, but it's not been the greatest. But I've found out more about myself. I can be impatient. I don't know when not to pester and when to pester, because John will say I'm quite persistent, you know.
Very persistent, in a good way. What happened going to year 6 then, about that wonderful idea?
Say that again.
What happened in year 6 was that wonderful idea about the sort of thought box and the...
Oh yeah, so John bloody knows my autobiography.
I can just start feeling the rest of the story. What's next? Max, tell me about the year 6 teacher.
Yeah.
Come on, you know this one.
So when I first joined year 6, my first day, the teacher grabbed the box from year 5, and she said, "Oh, you won't be needing this anymore, will you?" And before I could even answer, she threw it in the bin. And that's the kind of understanding again. You know, there was probably a good 2 teachers, I would say maybe 3, that really understood autism. I had a PE teacher, and his communication with me was so simple. He knew I wasn't very verbal, he knew that I wouldn't really open up even if there was something wrong. So he used to do just a simple thing like, "Max, we having one of these today, or having one of them?"
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go, or, you know, and he would know that I was alright. And it's just simple things like that, you know, that it's so simple yet effective. And then you get people like the year 6 teacher who just, you know, I remember one day I hid under the table because I was upset, and she kept telling me to get out from under the table. We had a thing called special time, you know. So,
oh, like golden time.
Yeah. So they used to go 5 minutes of special time. Don't come out now, it'll be 10 minutes. So anyway, before long, I wasn't coming out, I was too upset, and I think she took away like 30 minutes of special time or something. So anyway, I came out of the school. I don't think I've ever told this.
No, I haven't heard this one.
I come out of school, and apparently my
Now
nan
was coming next though.
my nan was picking me up, and anyway, apparently I came out as white as a ghost. And my nan said, "What's the matter?" And I just burst out crying, because that's the one thing that you do when someone asks you when you're all right and you're not, is you start to cry as soon as they go, "Yeah." So my nan's gone, "What's the matter?" And I, you know, told her, "Good, you know." So my nan's bursted in there, all guns blazing. Nan's like Rambo at this point, you know, he's got the shotguns.
Go on now.
And she's confronted the teacher, and the teacher's like, "Oh, can I help you?" And she goes, "Yeah, you know, what's going on here?" And anyway, I've come walking down, and the teacher literally shouted at me, going, "Max, you can go away for a second." And I've hid in like the corner and started crying, and my nan was like, "You don't speak to him like that." She was like, the teacher said, "Oh, I know how to deal with autistic students." And my nan said, "Yeah, it looks like it."
Yeah, it looks like it.
So that day forward, if the teacher ever said something that I didn't like, I was saying, "That's big."
Say that, teacher.
20 minutes of special time. Your
I
hand's
don't
coming
think
today.
so. How long is it? 45 minutes extra.
So yeah, that was always a bit of a bluff card. Even if she weren't picking up, no, it's picking up. She ain't happy. But it's just again that understanding, you know, that teacher sadly just never really grasped it, which was unfortunate. But then we have met teachers that, you know, have them. We saw a teacher who once upon a time told me not to put my pen down.
Well, we did. So yeah, this was in a lesson. I had to walk it. So in this particular school, this is now an independent special school that Max is in, and
Sorry to skip.
it was on a very behaviourist way of working, which I didn't like the way.
You got points, so it's like 5 points a lesson. Somehow, some way, 4 got lost, so you couldn't get a 4.
No, you couldn't get 4. You got 1 for being there.
So if you uniform.
No, that was the same. Being there in the right uniform.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, being there in the right uniform. Turning up was a good thing. Turning up in the right uniform. interacting well with your peers, interacting well with the adults, having a go at your learning, and a 5th bonus point if you got all 4, wasn't it? Something like that. Anyway, I walked into the lesson once, and Max, for about 4 years, never dropped a point. He always got top points for every lesson. He got very obsessed with it, didn't he, actually?
Very obsessed with numbers.
What were the points?
225.
225. So he still knows now what maximum amounts of points would add up to at the end of the week. And that's a hard thing to maintain every day, particularly in a school like this. Really hard. Exhausting. But I walked into a lesson once and the teacher was saying, I'm sorry, you're not going to have your full points today. And it was getting into, I was like, what's going on here? She said, the teacher said, Max is refusing to stop work. And I was like, hold on, we're at school, are we? What are we doing? Like, no, I've told him he's got to stop now. And he's refusing to follow my instructions. I was like, hold on a minute, this doesn't sound very fair. Because Max really, once he got started on a piece of work, wanted to do it well, wanted to finish it, and it was like coming up to break time.
It used to get frustrating as well because there was people in there with complex needs, and unfortunately some of them just didn't want to learn, you know. And English was the kind of one lesson where they gave us a book, and then you read it, and then you'd be able to write what you wanted about it. And you know, I was writing, and I was a little bit in front of people, and the teacher wanted us to be all at the same point. But I found that incredibly frustrating because if they just kept knocking about and not wanting to learn, then I just kept it, I'm never going to finish the book. So there was an element of like, well, yeah, I can't make them read it, so why don't I just...
You should carry on. I did have words anyway. You did get your points.
Yeah. It's like 10 years later.
10 years later. We'll pause now for any questions you might like to ask Max about maybe secondary school before we move into the special school context.
So did you go to from year 7?
No, so I left primary in year 6, and then I went to a school in Reading called
History.
Yes. Yeah. And they had an ASD unit though. And I think only 2 people get accepted for the unit a year, which is quite a low number, really, for the amount of people. You know, there's 700,000 people with autism in the UK. You know, so if schools are only offering, you know, 2 places per unit, you know, it's not a big turnover, really.
No.
But unfortunately, the problem with this unit is they wanted people in the classroom, in the unit, who had conditions. But they wanted people with conditions who, let's say, towed the line. They were well behaved, they had issues, but not as, you know, I don't want to say severe because I think everyone's got their issues, but
they were compliant autistic children.
Yes, and they were at probably a much better place than what some other people were in terms of family or things that were going on at home, including myself, because my granddad just died and I didn't really know how to deal with that. I went to a new mainstream school as all my mates went up the road.
So Max went to a different school to all his friends, so ended up at a different school.
So I had to make new friends, I had to get to know, you know, new kind of language because they spoke a lot differently. You know, there was a lot of kind of terminology like sick and
sick.
Yeah. So I know where to line. My first
kids. Years ago. That's not our kids. There's a question. Come on, quick, ask you a question.
I think I've forgotten there.
French.
So you went to a different school to all of your friends from juniors. Was that your choice? Was it the school's choice? Was it your parents' choice?
I think because I had a statement now in educational health and care plan. It was mainly down to the government, you know.
Professionals.
They came in, they assessed me. It was between and
mainstream.
I think it's mainstream, but it's more people who have got Down syndrome.
So learning difficulties.
Yeah.
So it's a special school.
Yeah. It's more of a special school. Yeah, but I think what my mum and dad felt at the time as well, that was the option they were given, but I think they just felt it might be a better place for me as well.
You would think a mainstream school with an autistic base,
it would make sense.
Yeah, because then you get the opportunity to do both, we would hope. But do we talk about integration? So that would be like a mainstream with an integrated autistic unit.
And what was bad about it as well is you had an ASD unit and then you had an LSU unit.
Learning support?
Unit, yeah. And to me that never made sense. And what I mean by that is I didn't see why they couldn't have just had an LSU unit with teachers that study in autism and put, you know, the people with autism in there, because I felt from the get-go you had kids from LSU that were able to kind of, in some degree, hide what they had, you know, if they didn't want their friends to know, because it could just be something like, how do I word it? I'm going to say noticeable, but it could be an unhidden condition.
Yeah, hidden condition. Yeah.
If you looked at them, you wouldn't know that they had it. You'd be kept guessing. Well, it's in the LSU unit, so it's got to have something, but you would never pinpoint it unless this person told you. ASD unit, it let you write out.
They're all autistic.
Yeah, autistic spectrum disorder unit. You know, so you were gone before you didn't have a chance to hide it. You didn't have a chance to, you know, be maybe see me. You know, and it hindered that, and that's why I wanted the TA there, because you had different TAs for the LSU and you had different teachers for the ASD. So if you saw teachers that were from the ASD unit, you'd know, oh, it's autism. What's that? It's a teacher from autism.
Yeah.
You know, and you pinpoint it like that. And it was hard, you know, something was really hard because, you know, I was dealing with death at my granddad, I was dealing with making new friends, and I was also trying to keep in touch with old friends.
In mainstream classrooms?
Yes.
So again, now the expectation is you can get from this classroom to that classroom to that classroom to this teacher to that teacher, have your own resources.
The teacher still wasn't really proactive with the ASD unit, and still wasn't communicative with them either. You know, if you didn't come in with a pen, you know, they would still, you know, not understand why.
You get punished with it.
Well, yeah, you know, I had a teacher kick me out of the class once because I didn't bring a pen. And it's that kind of like, well, you know, and sometimes in the ASD unit as well, they wouldn't be able to cover all lessons. So sometimes you was left on your own to go to a lesson.
Yeah.
And if you've got someone there that, you know, is heavily assisting you, always got pens, always got books and things like that, you know, which did help, you know. If you ever went to a lesson on your own, which sometimes happened, you know, it would be a bit like, oh, God, you know, what do I do?
Yeah.
I've gone there, Max. You just kind of answered my question. I want to ask about obviously the primary secondary transition you've covered, but what about the smaller, you know, transitions throughout the day, primary or secondary, where you had to sort of like, there's an expectation you just got to almost forget something, move onto a totally different mindset.
Yeah.
Is that ever posed a challenge, and what did you do to, you know, combat that really?
That's a good question.
It's a tough question, because in schools, secondary schools, you're expected to move from a maths lesson to an English lesson,
It's
to a
very
PE
difficult.
lesson, to a French lesson, to a...
Because you had to remember where you were going, you had to remember what you needed for that class, what book you
How
needed.
you doing homework.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think I'd ever done one bit of homework. I was always given homework, but I don't think I'd ever done it because it was so much chaos at home. You know, my mum, and I feel sorry for parents now because they teach everything differently. You know, the amount of times I've come home and I've done a maths question with my mum and I've gone, you know, I used to go, no, I don't think you can do it like that. Why? Bid maths. What's bid maths? What do you mean bid maths? What's that? I just do 5 over 5 and then you know, divide it by 2. Oh, you can't do that though. You've got to do bid maths.
It's not how the teachers taught you in school.
Yeah.
Different.
And then your parents are going, you know, and then you get in an argument with your parents because you're going, no, mum, it's this. No, it's this.
And that's how I got taught when I was at school.
Yeah. And it's such a culture difference. And what I hate about it is they upgrade small things like that to make it better. But they still haven't managed to upgrade how we support people with learning difficulties or special needs. I find it astonishing that they can just kind of throw out, oh yeah, big maths, we make that a thing.
Yeah, big maths.
But, you know, and then you look at exclusions and everything else, you think, what are you doing about that?
Was it difficult with your diagnosis and getting the EHCP? Were your parents on board? Was the school on board? Was it a long process?
I think my mum saw many doctors about my condition, and I think most of them said, no, apart from one. His name was Dr. Loved him.
Yeah.
Thought he was brilliant, had a really good relationship with him as well. You know, I used to go to the doctors, and he was like, well, he was just the guy, you know, that helped, you know, to the point where one day I think this is nowhere relying on that. I used to go every week at one point to the doctors because he just wanted me to fix his computer. So I was installing like a karaoke thing.
I think I better see Max next week. Half an hour.
Before, well, I think he might have another condition.
Yeah.
What's that? The karaoke.
Yeah, Windows Media Player
Yeah.
not working.
No, but he's a lovely guy, and you know, the thing is, he wasn't round, you know, he didn't tread on eggshells. He was very straight to the point, and he said, you know, I think he's got this. I know why doctors keep saying no, because it's a long process, but yeah, I think he saw how emotional my mum was, and how much effect it had on her, and how strongly my mum actually felt about me having these conditions. You know, and it's evident to some degree that, you know, doctors do get scared too, because they don't want to pinpoint, a lot of them don't want to put that label on you. But I find it very contradicting, because doctors won't give you the label, but they're very quick to give you medicine or tablets to stimulate that. You know, it's like, you know, it's like a lot of the time people who go in for ADHD, they get a diagnosis of depression because they don't fit all the tips. Yeah. But it's very obvious.
Matt, this is really powerful stuff. Those of you that are in the second year doing my SEM module, during your reading week, you've got to explore the labelling debate. You know, is it positive, is it not positive? For Max's mum, it was a huge sigh of relief in a way, because suddenly it gives you something to think about, something to work with. But from a parent perspective, it's a very long process. How old were you when you were diagnosed then?
Definitely before primary.
Is primary?
Before
primary. Because you were non-verbal for the age of 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that helped quite a bit, because obviously when you've got someone not speaking, you can't just keep going, no, there's nothing wrong with it. Comes to the point where it's like, and obviously not spoken to for 20 years. So that might be an issue.
No, he's fine. Let him carry on. Let him carry on at school.
As well with autism in girls,
Yeah.
there was a big stereotype for very, very, very many years that girls didn't have autism. And still to this day, I do YouTube videos as well, but I bring this up in the video. Still to this day, there's 5 times more men that get diagnosed with autism than women.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any calculation on whether women have autism. I think that's actually...
There was a question here as well.
There's 2 parts of the question. What did you find yourself looking back now that the label of autism and all the different, that they actually helped you? I know for your mum, for you, did they?
That's a really good question, actually. My mum was very good in the way that even though I had these labels, she never let it define me. She never put up with excuses. She might be a bit less, she was probably lenient in some ways than others, but the key thing with my mum is she never let me see that she was being needed. So, you know, I'd like to say, you know, my brother, I think, probably got more told off about certain things, but mine would be probably a 2% downscale of the telling off. So it wasn't a lot in it, but they were always mindful of the fact that, okay, well, he has got a condition as well, but she never ever said to anybody or anyone that, oh, you know, let him get away with that because of autism, you know, because my mum was like, no. The only thing that my mum disagreed with is when I kicked the toilet door down at school, they said that we're not going to let him know his punishment till Monday. And this was a Friday. My mum went in the school and she said, not only you'll be punishing him, which is a big enough punishment anyway, so if you're going to do that, there better be no punishment, because not only that punishes him, but it punishes me and my family, because that's all we're going to hear all over the weekend, because he will worry about it non-stop. So she said, I get that he's done wrong, and I've been having words with him as well, because he'll be grounded for what he done. But there's one thing you don't do, you don't let someone with autism, especially at school, wait for a punishment, because it just impacts their weekend, it will impact mine, and it's not on. To do what you're going to do and tell me otherwise don't do anything. So if you're going to leave it to the weekend, you better not be doing anything. And if you do, then God help you. And I think they left it. And I think they told my mum on the spot, but nothing came of it. It was, that Monday, it was like it didn't happen.
I mean, we knew a boy as well called and he was autistic as well and ADHD and often never took his medication. So he was quite bouncy, should we say.
Yeah.
He was in my class. First thing he'd do, come in the morning, he'd just come through that door, jump on that table, jump on this table, jump on that table, jump on that table, run around the classroom a couple of times, and then maybe sit down.
I've got a brilliant story about it. First day of my school, I had to share a taxi way home, and the boys used to get these sweets that used to make your mouth like burn.
Oh yeah, there was really extreme sours.
Yeah.
It should be illegal.
They're the best.
They make your tongue bleed.
Anyway, I used to try one. I put one in, about a minute. That's enough. Tongue sore. No word of a lie. He puts about 8 of them in his mouth. Blood dripping.
Oh my God. Took the skin off the chocolate.
And he's just like, yeah, they're not, shouldn't they?
Oh, I talked about the toilet door being kicked in. He was very good at parkour, wasn't he? So parkour was,
a lot of stuff.
urban running around buildings and things like that. He was really, really good. But his mates used to dare him to do the things that they would never do. You know what I mean? If they saw a roof between this roof and another roof that was like beyond probably the safe distance that any human could jump, they'd dare him to do it. And so he was always coming in with bruises and cuts and all sorts of stuff.
He would do it.
He'd do it because his friends had wound him up. Come on, do it, you can do it. So they weren't really friends, and that was quite hard for him to understand. And he got involved in the police quite often because they dared him to set fire to things in town and all sorts of stuff. So, any other questions for Max at this point? We'll move on to,
when you were in primary school, did you find that you almost had to start again each school year, or it might be more a question for your mum, I guess, but did they sort of hand over to the next teacher and sort of support you all right, or did you feel like it was going back to square one and having to...
That's a good question. I think the education was always a fresh start, because it was always like, right, going to learn a bit more hard stuff this year. I always found that a struggle. In terms of support, I always had the same TA, which was handy, because obviously it just meant that they knew where you were at and they knew what your strengths and what your
weaknesses. Did they stay with you sort of in every lesson throughout the day?
Yeah, at primary school they would go from year 5 to year, so they carried on, with you and that support. But educational-wise, it was trickier, just because the hardness of it got, it got harder and harder every year, so it was trickier. Support-wise, I think the only thing that I found difficult was swapping classrooms, because you would swap classrooms every year, and that was a bit of a change. But apart from that, the year 6 teacher really was the only one that was a bit not really understanding. But I mean, it's really tricky because, as I say, most of it was just work and how hard it got.
Yeah.
But their support was always consistent. Whether their support was enough is up for debate. I mean, when I left the school, they got a really bad kind of Ofsted rating, and they said that the education wasn't enough for people without conditions, so. And they took away special time and things like that and plays. But one thing that school did do is it made me realise how much I love like singing and acting. I'm terrible at singing now. But it just made me realise actually life's not all about books and knowing all that stuff. It can be about the other kind of arts, like singing or acting. And I loved it, I really did. But I was always this kid that never got my own part, but I always tried and always carried on. So I carried that on as I got older, not the singing, but the acting.
We'll share your website in a minute towards the end of the talk. I mean, so primary school, actually, we know that most exclusions happen in secondary school. 84% happen in secondary school because of things like transition and relationships with peers and adults and all that kind of stuff. And so after year 7, I think it was probably year 7, you joined. So was it year 9?
Year 9. I was just finishing year 9.
So 2 years in mainstream.
Yeah.
In a unit, and then school now is in Oxford, and it's an independent special school. And I mean, Max can tell you about it. It was an interesting environment because of the complexity of needs of the children and young people. So do you want to tell us a bit about
Oh gosh.
where to start?
Yeah. So when I got expelled from, my mum was given two options: boarding school or an autistic school in Oxford. Those were the words. Autistic school.
So a residential school,
Or
boarding school, or internal autism school.
Now I didn't want to go boarding. My mum knew I wouldn't, so I went to the autistic school. And when I got there, again, I was really like John and Bob, sadly not with us anymore. But they showed us around the school, and there was only one class in that day, and it was year 8.
Yeah.
Oh, it seemed peaceful, quite nice.
Quite calm, quite settled.
Yeah. And I thought it was really, it seemed like a really nice place. And anyway, day one I got there, and I remember meeting all the teachers. I shook their hand and I said, hi, I'm Max, nice to meet you. And I just remember the teachers kind of giving me a really hot
Look, who is this kid? What is this about? How good is this person? How good is this young man?
I didn't get it, I just thought people kept looking at me really odd and to say, what is this? What? Anyway, after lesson 1, I soon found out why. There was swearing, a lot of bullying went on, a lot of racism went on where he lived, a lot of homophobia was thrown about. The classroom was very volatile. It kind of wanted just to pick on each other all the time and bully each other.
So I'm going to intervene at some point, so I might just tell a story, not to interrupt the flow, but to sort of explain. And I've mentioned before that the school was an hour and a half. Basically, the school would accept children and young people from up to an hour and a half away. And so sometimes that meant children and young people coming from London every day, and from some really challenging estates actually, Harrow, Wembley, coming in different taxis, but often from different gang culture back home, different ethnic minority students.
You can tell by now it's not really an autistic school.
No, lots of young people with autism, but many children with very complex, trauma experiences, and ADHD and every other kind of mental health condition you can think of. So Max being, I'll say, quite sensitive, I think, in terms of your, engagement in learning and wanting to do well and all that sort of stuff, was also in a class with six up to 8 children with really quite complex behavioural behaviours that would challenge us as adults, but also the peers.
And I said to John when I came in today, I hope you don't mind.
No, somebody's already mentioned this earlier about the article we've just read about young people in further education.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I said to John when I came in, I said in such a sense, I said it was like being in a prison but being innocent. And my only friends were the jail, the prison guards, because I had more relationships and friendships that I had with the teachers that I had, with the students,
I mean, this is a hard insight, isn't it, to a young person's experience of school, because from our perspective, as teachers working in the school, we're trying to meet the needs of all young people with quite complex conditions in one place. But at the same time, the impact on that experience on the young people is really significant. Now, Max and I got back in contact probably 5 years ago, maybe not quite that long ago, 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago. And since then, I've been discovering more about Max's experience around, what he enjoyed about school and what he didn't enjoy about school. And I think, the behaviour of the other children and young people was volatile.
Yeah, I never say, I always say no one is bad, no one is, I think there's probably evil people in the world, but I think as children go, and especially young adults, I think at that stage, I don't think they're bad. I think some of the behaviour they might do is bad, but I think you have to really, before you can ever say they're bad or evil, I think you really need to look at their history and kind of look at what they've gone through, because a lot of the kids that, when I was a kid, I used to think, well, why are you doing that? Why are you being good? Why, all the time it was why. Why do you think it's alright to hit a teacher? Why do you think it's alright to spit at someone? Why would you bring in a religious dagger? Why would you try and blow up a minibus? You know, why?
Just my behavioural altercations during our
My first assembly was the head teacher stood up and he said, right, who done it? Everyone's looking at each other. And he's gone, who rubbed manure up the wall? And I thought, it wasn't me.
No.
That's what I was saying. But I'm thinking, what? You know, is this? And I used to ask myself why, but then, you know, then I speak to John and, you know, he's, you know, spoke, you know, quite openly about, you know, some of, you know, the experiences these people go through. Then you actually go, okay, I can see why. You know, I can see why maybe they lash out and that.
But interestingly, we talk about this sort of, you know, specialist environment. What I was always trying to negotiate with the head teacher was, could we not have, and this is where it gets complicated ethically and morally, a separate unit within the school for children with autism? But what you're then doing is you're segregating. Okay, well the children with autism go over there, those with trauma here, ADHD there, no idea there. Oh, well, we got to the point where we tried to separate the year 9, when you were in year 10, there was another year below you that was a double class, and both
I remember.
were really challenging. So we as a staff team, we thought, well, do we put the children that would learn in one class and the children that won't in another? We didn't do it, because you can't. Do you understand where I'm coming from about the separation and separation and separation and separation?
Different than what the LSD units are.
Exactly. It's complicated. But, I mean, from my perspective, you know, your first impression of what you've met of Max today. Max is no different now to the day I met him, however many years ago, nearly about 10 years ago. But Max is, you know, articulate, engaging, interesting, enthusiastic, motivated. That's true. But that's what it's like at school. That's like at,
Keep going.
That's so And so for me, I was thinking, how did this young person come to a school like this, where actually his local authority are paying £60,000 a year for Max to attend a special school, more than Eton, more than Harrow? Yes, you can ask a question.
Oh yeah, I know. I was just going to say when we was talking about dual work and stuff, I found, because I worked in, I found that there's such this persona of these groups and gangs and stuff.
And
yeah, pretty
I
much.
was down with kids again.
Back to but yeah, and it's funny because when I used to take them, you know, maybe one-on-one out for a chat or some intervention or whatever, you'd actually find that like mask really comes down so significantly with these kids. I can do anything. And then you pull them out and they're like, actually no, so this just happened
I really
this
want
morning.
some help, exactly.
Yeah.
And how we think about that behaviour, for me, children desperately needed, you know, sensitive teachers, care, you know, nurturing experiences, and some of them would reject that really heavily because they'd never had anybody care for them before. They didn't know what it was like to be cared for.
I think a lot of the kids really just wanted a hug and someone to say it'd be alright, but when they got it, they didn't know how to quite cope with it. They kind of went, don't touch me, you know, but inside, you know, what do you want?
What do you want? And, you know, we used to try and do the most innovative, what we thought as adults, this is important, most innovative curriculum, you know. So hands-on, practical stuff. You know, these kids can love a bit of construction. Let's take them out and they can, you know, learn some skills that they're going to want in the future. Let's take them to forest school. Let's get them to do some forest school. You hated all of that. I've only just discovered.
I hated forest school. I hated anything manual.
Anything outdoors.
Anything manual.
He'd have been quite happy in the classroom just getting on with his work. So there's us thinking, let's design this innovative curriculum. You know, and for some it worked really, really well.
Oh yeah.
Some, you know, the music production stuff really, for some, really engaging.
I remember
the technology stuff.
We were doing OCR for DT level 3, and I was useless. We had to build a speaker box, and these guys in this classroom, they would never, ever, you know, concentrate on anything. One of the lads built a speaker box the size of that big, and I thought, my God! And there's me with my speaker box, probably.
Backstage your mobile. Tiny.
Anyway, out of all those people, who do you think passed?
You.
Because I've done the paper.
Because you finished it, didn't you?
Because every one of them, when it came to the written work, not doing that.
Yeah.
And I thought how they should have done it really is half an hour of that,
Yeah.
half an hour of that, or half an hour of that, then you get to do that, because it's a bit they really enjoy, but then you kind of take away the one thing that they like, and it does become difficult. It's just, I think it was such a shame that they could build something as beautiful as what they built.
Yeah.
And some of them were so good, and they really proud of it. It's like
Something they've created, something they can own, something.
taxi drivers, not so much.
Great big.
I like getting out of the car. But I just used to think it's such a shame that you could have had an OCR out of it.
So I was thinking from a pedagogy point of view, I mean, what's wrong with having them do a verbal presentation on what they've...
Yeah, but then some of them wouldn't do that really.
Oh.
I mean, I remember when we were doing
So complicated.
functional skills level 1 at the school, I had to do a presentation, and we had to have a group discussion story, part of functional 1, and it could be a group discussion about everything. And to be honest, I really tried my best to speak to them, because none of them wanted to do it. But I just said, guys, just have a normal conversation, don't swear, don't do any of that, just have a normal conversation, we're just recording it. It's an easy ask.
Easy marks.
And some of them done it, some of them didn't. But when it came to presenting in front of the class, I think the only person that did was that everything wanted to, definitely wouldn't have, because he was very, that kind of thing really.
Yeah, pathological demand avoidance.
Yeah.
But these young people were resisting. We talk about the language of resistance. They're resisting the educational experience by this point because they've been failed so many times by so many different adults. They're like, what's the point?
Downtrodden, excluded, their probably home life isn't good, they probably don't feel wanted, they probably don't feel loved, and at that point they probably think, well, you know what, who cares? I don't care anymore, no one else does.
No.
And it used to hurt me from a perspective, from teacher point of view, because I used to see them go home every night after getting punched, kicked, spat at, sworn at, and I used to think, well, it's them, I can come in tomorrow. Yeah, seriously, I just used to think, and I used to see John, I don't know, John's quite a clever guy, but after he kept coming in 20, I used to think, John, you're not as clever as
Every day I come, every day.
But they cared, and that's what drove them, and I admire that, and I'd say, you say about the segregation, how it would have helped, if anything, keeping me in that class, in that environment, it was tough and it was horrible at times, but actually it taught me a lot of life skills. No one can pee me off anymore. I'm so intolerant towards people, to the point where it's like, I was in a classroom for 4 years, where people going, I'm not as fat as your mum and all this stuff. People constantly trying to get under my skin. Now, if someone annoys me, well, at least they're not calling my mum fat. I just think, there's more things to worry about. And presenting, when I was in school council, I used to have to present in front of these people, and I used to think, any of them might be having a bad day, they might get up and hit me or throw something at me.
Well, we went back to the assembly, didn't we, recently?
Yeah.
Max and I went back to speak to the current students there, within about 2 minutes we'd both been heckled. Right. They were like, you're actually a farmer? I was like, no. Why don't you that's before I even started talking.
I gave that kid a tenner afterwards, so thanks for saying that. It needed to be said.
Still coming, don't worry. Right. Question from the front?
Well, I was going to say, if you had the opportunity, would you go to a special primary school, like during the primary education, because you had such a good experience at Children?
Yeah, I mean...
Do you think it would have helped?
That's a good question. I mean, to be honest, I think that one time I was really happy in life, really comfortable, was at primary. They had a lot of their flaws, and I didn't learn as much as what I wanted to, but actually support and how I felt, I was quite happy, especially when I found music and talent shows, that I really found my element there.
Yeah.
And it drove me on, because I used to sit in class and used to think, talent, that'd be cool, and I just started making friends near year 5 because I had something that, was me, it was no, I've got talent in school, because basically I went to the wrong activity day and the teacher thought I was that good or thought I was that crap. funny. I don't know. I was going through his head, it worked anyway. But he got me to sing in front of the whole school, and that gave me the idea, oh, what about if we do a talent contest next year? And from that, I just really kind of developed and wanted to go to school because I found it fun, I felt it engaging, exciting. And then once I'd done the song in front of the school, people were coming up to me and going, oh, that was wicked, and then, you know, I was making friends, and it was nice, you know. So, you know, I think special school at primary might have helped, but I think for the time it probably wouldn't have, just because, as I say, you didn't have the Autism Act. I don't think there was enough understanding even then, you know. I think now, you know, I would say potentially, but I think as well, I would want everyone, I want to live in a world really where any kid can go to any school, regardless of a special school or a mainstream school. I want to live in a world where a kid can go to any school and actually get the support that they need anywhere they go, period, you know. So
that's what I want to. Shouldn't have, you know, you're gonna explore this question in a few weeks' time for your online discussion. If there were no special schools or alternative provisions, where would these young people go? That's for you to think about. Another question for Max. Have you got any? Yeah, thank you. Oh, two. Just get to the front first and we'll get to that.
I just wanted to ask forward and ask about employment. So, like, have you been limited in any way as to, like, having something like?
So obviously the school didn't do GIFS at the time. That limited me quite a bit. But perseverance, persistence, pestering, what you want. You know, I was really determined, and I've done work experience at a CAF, and from that experience I went, I never want to work at a CAF. Hated it, useless, rubbish. And you know what your parents are like, when you're good at something, they're like, oh, my kids are genius at that. And mine was IT. And anyway, you know, I managed to get some work experience at an IT company. Walked in day one, I thought I knew everything about IT. Walked out that day, I went, I know nothing about IT. I knew nothing about it whatsoever, but I really enjoyed it. They were going to take me off an internship, then they moved, so I couldn't. Then just got into college, and a tutor gave me an unconditional offer. He said, as long as you get the grades that your school is offering, then I'll let you in, I could get in. And I was even behind on my science. It was like 2 months behind on my science, and I took work home to make sure I was still a pass, but I wanted a gold. You know, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like to, you know, do my best in everything. And I took these papers home. And anyway, I learned an extra paper. I took a paper about seeing.
You bad learner. Trying to get some extra learning done.
But I was 1 mark off the gold. I said, I took this one home. And they went, do you know everything? Yeah. Good.
Did that test as well?
I've done that test and I got gold because of it. Yeah. So it was that extra bit of studying that got me it.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I went to college. Overly didn't enjoy it. Again, new tutors, but independent again. You know, don't forget this, don't forget that. I think I wrote an essay that had 60 pages. The guy gave me a pass. Don't think he read it. Felt very injustice. Had a big row with him. He swore at me and whatnot. That was a good experience.
Just a college tutor.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting into an argument with a student.
Swore at me and said effing disregarding my mark, and I said, oh, you disregarding my work. Yeah,
fair point.
So, you know, and you know, most of the time tutors are right, but in this situation I felt that he just didn't read it because I tried to quiz him on, you know, what I put. He was like, and he didn't really know, you know, it was like, well, you didn't mention that.
60 pages is quite a lot, isn't it?
And I think in 60 pages, I'm not being funny, you're going to cover everything, aren't you, really? I mean,
You cover quite a lot, aren't you?
no, I'll tell you what I did cover, my print credit. That's what
No, it would have, wouldn't it? No, it's a lot of money.
2 quid minus. But after college, I applied for a job. That was out of 300 people, they narrowed it down to 50. I turned up on the interview day, everyone's wearing a suit, and I turned up in checkered shirt and chinos like an idiot. Thought that would work. That was my dress sense.
Yeah.
Come dress smart, and that was how I dress.
That was your smartest clothes, maybe.
Yeah. Never thought of wearing a suit.
No, it's alright. They want to advertise next time properly, shouldn't they?
Actually used to do a little advert saying they don't know how you dress.
No.
They used to show like just the bottom of people, suit trousers, shorts, actually used to do a little advert saying they don't know how you dress.
No.
They used to show like just the bottom of people with suit trousers, shorts, you know, and their message was it didn't really matter how you were dressed, it's what you got up here really. But I went to the interview and I thought, oh, I've not got this, you know. And anyway, they took me on, they opened the position up because they were only taking one on that year, and it was between me and someone else. He had it better on paper, I had it better in person. They thought, okay, let's take two of them on. Maths I struggled with, it took me 7 times to pass maths, eventually did. Because of that, I won West Berkshire Apprentice of the Year, passed my MVQ in IT, and then later on in the left the progression, more money, went on to a night shift job. I thought it would be a really good thing for me. It wasn't. Health declined. Christmas I was 20 stone 5, fatty liver, yeah, wee in blood as well. It was really kind of bad. And I decided at the beginning of this year I'm going to look after myself and make a change. And I did. So I've lost about 3 stone now. Not wee in blood anymore, fatty liver's gone. So employment at the minute is very, very.
What's the stats about autistic?
So currently there's only 16% of people with autism in full-time work. That hasn't changed for 10 years.
16%. Does that sink in? Only 16% of autistic adults in employment.
And it hasn't changed in 10 years.
Hasn't changed in 10 years. It's shocking. Right? Yeah. What I will say is Max is a huge national advocate now for raising awareness about autism.
I need to update that because that was July and I think I spoke to
talks at many different events nationally. He's spoken recently at a huge conference that you and I were at with over 200 Senkos and head teachers. He invites me when I get the opportunity to go to the House of Parliament with him. So here we are in the House of Parliament. So Max gets to go and work with all parts of parliamentary groups around autism awareness, particularly around the Autism Act. And Max, you might recognise from various TV shows, Holby City, Casualty, a few others that you've been involved with.
Yeah, done adverts for Ford, Santander.
Still doing that,
yeah. Still doing that. I'm going to be in a short film on 31st of October. And it's to do with, and it's actually, this will shock you, it's the first role I've had that hasn't been with someone with autism.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the roles you get typecast for, which is good because I think it does need someone with autism to play an autistic role, but at the same time, I think in the acting industry it's such a shame because they do look at people with autism and other, you know, needs and they think, well, you can't play a normal person. And yet they're very happy to have a normal person play someone with a condition. Grey Man, Brian Cranston's just in the film about a guy who's you know, paralysed from the head down. And it's sad because obviously the name does draw, and I don't have anything against, you know, Brian Cranston playing a disabled person because at the end of the day, it's acting, and that's what acting's about. But I just feel like it should work both ways before we start giving the only parts that disabled people can get. Let's sort the right thing out first. You know, Brian Cranston will get an act, you know, in a month's time anyway. Someone in a wheelchair who will only get casted, sadly, for those roles, and now having his parts took away by someone who's able. And I think really it should be reversed before we start thinking, you know, Brian Cranston will just get in a wheelchair and you know, will himself out. So
Max is also working for the National Autistic Society, which is the national autistic. They do lots of campaigns, and he was their main actor in a campaign a couple of years ago about employability of autistic individuals. So I'm conscious of time now, but I think I'd like to conclude with a round of applause for Max, and thank you very much.